Good morning, everyone, and welcome to OneAbility's annual Education Day. We're so thrilled to have you all join us today and appreciating one of the gifts of COVID is the opportunity to pivot to deliver this event virtually and to welcome friends from across the country and, in fact, North America today. So we want to kick off in a good way. So we're going to have an opening from Elder Alec Nelson in just 1 second. I do just want to begin by acknowledging my gratitude to be on Coast Salish territory, home of the Esquimalt, Songhees, and Wasanic nations today. And my name's Andrea Carey. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I will be your host today. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce someone that I just value and respect so much in my life. Elder Alec Nelson and I have had the opportunity to work together on a number of projects over the last few years. Alec is a proud member from Kinkham Inlet Village and has been living in Victoria for a number of years and is going to share a little bit more about himself. He is a graduate of the same program I went to at UVic, actually, Leisure Service Administration, and he's a senior advisor and elder for the Indigenous Sport, Recreation, Physical Activity and Recreation Council of BC. And he spent 7 years in the St. Michael's Residential School in Alert Bay and has bravely been sharing that story so others can learn about our true histories in Canada. So welcome, Alec, and I turn it over to you to open us. Thank you for being here.
Andrea, I've acknowledged Andrea for her welcoming remarks and introduction. And in saying that, I want to acknowledge the Lakwana nations from where I'm speaking from at this moment. At the same time, I want to acknowledge our creator for this wonderful day. And I guess from myself, I just want to, in my language, offer gratitude and gratitude toward our creator for our families, our friends, our communities, and to recognize that we are never, ever alone, and especially in times of COVID right now. And so we're very thankful for especially our families. We also want to recognize the strife that we are confronted with and the grieving that is happening. And but at the same time, I want to say thank the creator for these beliefs, these hopes, and to continue our day knowing that there is light ahead of us. And so around the world, there's a lot of suffering going on. In our families, there's a lot of suffering going on. And there again, it's that belief and hope that the days will be brighter. I do want to ask Creator to be with us as we come and gather and shake hands with our hearts, to come and share and offer us strength, wisdom, and guidance for this next while. And so with that, thank you, Creator, for your wonderful gifts. I just wanted to now add sort of some comments to what I'm going to be experiencing for the next 3 hours. I looked at the agenda and I am going to stay and take this all in. And it was just crossed my mind about Mother Nature and the wonderful teachings that are available to us when we open our hearts and our minds. And I think about OneAbility and its function and its purpose. And it quickly brought me to a cedar tree and its function and its purpose in our lives. And cedar tree is very magical as medicine, and we pay high tribute to that in our cultural ceremonies. And when we use the term resilience, I just think about a cedar tree that has been standing for a while, has grown and magnificently showing itself to the world. And then there's a lightning, thunder and lightning that hits, and one of the branches fall off. And the question is, what happens to that branch? Does it lose its function and purpose? No, it remains and maintains its medicine. It picks itself up and carries on with its life. And that's where I see OneAbilities. And I think about my brother Richie Peters. And I say, sometimes the cedar bough is struck, but it still maintains its purpose and function in this world. And so with this, I think about those teachings. And so with that, thank you very much for this opportunity to offer my sentiments and to be invited to this wonderful, wonderful gathering. Thank you. Back to you, Andrea.
Thank you, Alec. I was telling my daughter last night that I was going to have the opportunity to open with you today and to have you set us up for a good day. And she was telling me how they were playing a First Nation drum in her music class yesterday at school. And it just, it makes me so grateful that we're in a world that is evolving and appreciating the many gifts that Indigenous culture has bestowed upon us, and that we're actually taking the time to learn and for our kids to learn. So thank you for being here today and sharing your learnings with us as we kick off what I think will be an incredible few hours together. So I'm really glad you're staying. So I'm going to just do a couple of housekeeping pieces for us. So if you are joining us today, just a few things to kind of keep in mind. So we have muted everyone, and we do ask that you probably turn your camera off as well, just for bandwidth purposes. In order to best view this, we are going to spotlight, we have ASL interpreters joining us today, so we are going to try and spotlight them so that those that need that service and want that service can see it as easily as possible. You can also, on your view screen, when you go to the gallery function, you can select on the three dots to hide non-video participants as well. So that can help you in your viewing options today. We will have different opportunities throughout the day for question and answer. Primarily, we're going to suggest those come through the chat box, but you can also try putting up your hand if you'd like to ask something directly, and we will do our best to get to those. We have a pretty jam-packed morning. We're going to try and give you a couple breaks in between and show a couple videos on those breaks. Yeah, we're really looking forward to some phenomenal presentations and some opportunities to learn and connect and grow together. So I would like to introduce our first speaker of the day. Marco Pasca is someone that I've known for a few years now and have had the opportunity to be inspired and energized every time we get to cross paths, because he is just like a bundle of energy. And so I'm super excited to share his enthusiasm and zest for life with you, each of you today. He's an award-winning entrepreneur, accessibility consultant, and a speaker. He's worked in some of BC's biggest change-driven business leaders to support them to be champions for more accessible, inclusive workplaces. He has also helped pave the way for all Canadians to have universal access to programs, services, and places wherever they live, work, and play. And Marco and I served on a board together a few years ago, and he certainly does all of that and more. So over to you, Marco, to get us set up for some action-oriented ways we can change our thinking and our structures.
Thanks so much, Andrea. I really appreciate it. This is an incredible opportunity. And even virtually, I love seeing that we're able to have people connect with us today and get involved. Let me go ahead and screen share my presentation. There we go. And I'm hoping that everybody can see it. So when I was asked to come out today and speak about resiliency, mental health, and disability, I thought to myself, this actually comes down to creating inclusive communities, especially during a time where we really need to band together because, many of us are very distant with each other. So I've got 40 minutes or so to carve out exactly what I've come to when it comes to creating not only inclusive workplaces, because I've done work as an accessibility consultant in workplaces, but also creating our communities to be more inclusive. And actually, it's come down to three main things I've learned throughout my career. It's first, you have to change attitudes, then you can change any kind of physical barriers or overcome barriers, and then finally, you transform the leadership and culture of an organization or a community. But let's dive a little bit deeper into what I'm going to cover today. So defining disability. So we all know generally what visible disabilities are, but I think one of the things to cover as well is going to be actually talking more about not just those physical disabilities, but also those invisible disabilities as well, which I think is really, really important. Breaking down attitudinal barriers. So I'm going to get vulnerable with you guys. I'm going to talk a little bit about my experiences as a person with a disability navigating the workforce myself and what that's been like for me. Then talk about overcoming the physical barriers and how the smallest changes can make the biggest difference in the world. We all start in different places of our journey. So whether that's in the workplace, to our cities, to our province and beyond, there's a place to start, but it's more important where you finish. And we're constantly learning and growing from this experience. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about some leaders that I've come to know and what they've learned along the way. Then talk about building cohesiveness and how we have to work together to create a diverse workforce and community. I'm going to provide some practical tips and tools so that you actually feel like you can walk away with something tangible today, that you feel like, hey, I can actually put this into action today and I don't have to wait, which is really, really exciting. What you can actually do to support inclusion wherever you are, whether that's virtually or in person. You know, this resiliency thing is so, so important. I know for myself, even as a professional speaker, I had to completely adapt my life and the way that I do things because now I'm working from home primarily. So it's about these accommodations and what we can do in our home front and our work fronts to make it a bit easier. And then at the end, I do have a few minutes that I'm leaving in case people want to actually interact and have a couple of questions. But as Andrea said, if you have some burning questions, put them into the chat box and then we'll try our best to get to them. Okay, so first and foremost, changing attitudes. Now, attitudinal barriers towards people with disabilities are among the first that we have to overcome when it comes to building inclusive community and a workforce, as I mentioned. But of course, I want to give you a little bit more context as to who I am before I really dive in to this presentation as a speaker. So, who is Marco Pasqua? Well, what you wouldn't know from seeing me on a tiny little screen through Zoom is when I was born 3 months premature, okay? I only weighed roughly 2 pounds, 10 ounces. That's roughly about the size of 2 butter packages. The doctors told my parents that I would be lucky to even survive the night. In fact, get this, they told my mom to not even bother to sign the birth certificate because I was probably gonna die. Now, if that doesn't speak to resiliency, I don't know what does. You know, and I'm really fortunate because I've had parents and a family who's been supportive of me my entire life. But of course, it was not going to be easy. There is a struggle, there is challenges, but as our elder this morning said, it's in those challenges that you actually build stronger. Just because the branch gets struck, it doesn't mean that you're weaker. And so I got struck, but that was okay. I had to find outlets. And so for me, the outlet was recreation and sport. And so I went and introduced myself into various different team sports. I did everything from rock climbing to sit skiing, wheelchair basketball, swimming, horseback riding, weightlifting. I mean, you name it, I did it. And I wanted to show my parents that although I had cerebral palsy as a result of being born 3 months premature, I wasn't going to let that hold me back. So much so, in fact, that I went on to pursue a career, sports in more of an extended ability for myself. And I actually competed in the BC Summer and Winter Games for athletes with disability to earn over 22 gold, 10 silver, and 2 bronze medals. And it was a real honor to do that in these various sports. I even got to meet one of my mentors, somebody that I'm sure many of you know who he is, Rick Hansen, the man in motion. This is really what inspired me to learn more about myself. But where did that all start? Well, that love for sport actually started when I was in high school. You see, I had a PE teacher in high school that didn't cast me aside, that didn't say because I have a disability that I had to have something completely different, or that maybe I could just bounce a ball against the wall because I just couldn't do the things the other students could do. No, this teacher was totally different. In fact, that quintessential moment, I'll never forget, because it was when we were doing a class and we had dodgeball, okay? Now, dodgeball in a wheelchair, I'm sure you can imagine, is not the easiest of sports. And so this teacher said to me, okay, you know what? If Marco's going to do dodgeball with us, we'll just have to make some adaptations, just some slight adaptations so that he can get involved. And so he made a rule. Okay, so if any of the balls hit me in the body, then it counts. But if you hit me in the wheelchair, then it doesn't count. But of course, this meant that now I was the first person chosen on every team so they could use me as the official shield to block all the balls. Ironically, this is actually a moment of major inclusion because now not only was I able to be involved in the class, but now my students were actively seeking to have me part of their team. And I even developed some strategies around being able to store some of the dodgeballs in the spokes of my wheels of my wheelchair so I could unload like a Gatling gun. And I have some of these like really fond memories from when I was a kid being able to play these sports, but that's just it. It started with a moment of inclusion. It started with that, and that's what springboarded me to be able to define what disability means to me. Now, let's talk a little bit about the definition of disability. Okay, now when most people define a disability, they may think of something like this, a wheelchair, maybe something like this, a hearing aid, or something like this, a white cane for somebody with low vision or who is blind. But as I mentioned off the top of this presentation, what about the things that we can't see? Hidden disabilities, things like anxiety and depression, ADHD, autism, and learning disabilities. You see, you might have people today in your community or people that you work with who have some of these conditions, and for one reason or another, they've decided to not disclose this information just because maybe they're afraid of the stigma that follows having this condition. I know in talking to a lot of my friends and family who have these conditions, I myself as a speaker, I'm going to come out and read out and say it. I have suffered and struggled with anxiety and depression for most of my life. You know, but that actually empowers me. It makes me stronger as a speaker. It makes me and gives me the tools to be able to support you and other people in the community. But for many of these people, there is that stigma. Well, what if they look at me differently? What if they think I'm not going to be able to do my job as a result of having these conditions? And even though my disability is a lot more visible, especially when I'm in my wheelchair, I had some of these stigmas placed against me as well. In fact, the very first time I had a stigma placed against me was in my very first workplace opportunity when I was in grade 11 in high school during a co-op. I was so thrilled to get this job though. We had opportunities to go to wherever we wanted to work. And my dream was to always work with technology and computers because it was an incredible thing to be able to see how you could extend someone's abilities through a piece of technology. And I was so fortunate that I actually landed a job at the co-op in, at the computer store. And I was so pumped. In fact, I did so well during my co-op period that when that finished up, I actually asked the manager if he thought that I could join the team full time. I'll never forget the look on his face. He kind of had a look of concern on his face. And then he said to me, you know what, Marco, actually, can I take you out for lunch first? Now, being a guy who's never afraid to say no to a free lunch, I said, yeah, of course, you could take me out for lunch. Well, he took me out to lunch and he explained that as much as he was wanting to have me join the team full time, he had some concerns. You see, as a full-time employee, I'd have to do other things that I wasn't expected of me as a co-op student. I'd have to restock shelves and lift heavy boxes. And while he couldn't live with himself if I were to lift a heavy box and drop it on myself and hurt myself. I mean, that just wouldn't be good. Now, in that moment, I could have been offended. I could have said, how dare you place that upon me? How dare you place that assumption upon me? But I've always been a guy that makes, lemonade out of lemons, but also looks for opportunities. And so I looked at this as an opportunity to maybe change perception. So I said to him, okay, no, I totally understand your concern, but I'll tell you what, how about you give me like another 2-week probationary period, like you would if I was any new employee, even though you've been working with me for several months now. And if in those 2 weeks with these new roles, these new tasks, I'm not able to prove that I'm able to do the job in the way that you expect, then no harm, no foul. You can ask me to leave or you can let me go just like you would with anyone else. Well, He liked this compromise. And so the very next day, I started my first ever official job in working in this computer store at a full-time role. Well, wouldn't you know it though, that that's when the universe had something interesting to show me. The universe does work in mysterious ways. And in fact, a customer walked in who was looking for a video card. And the video card happened to be on the very top shelf, something that I was definitely not going to be able to reach. But again, I looked at this as an opportunity. So I walked the gentleman over to the video cards, and I knew that the most expensive, however, the best card for him was going to be kind of in that top shelf area, kind of tucked away. And so I kind of looked at him, and I looked at the shelf, and I looked at him, and I looked at the shelf, and I gestured as though I was ready to reach up and grab that card and grab it down for him, knowing full well I wasn't going to be able to reach it. But because I looked at him and used my body language, before I could say anything, as I was reaching up, he just reached over because he was about 6 foot something, grabs the card. He goes, "Yeah, I think this is the one here," passes it to me, and now I was able to make the sale. Well, the amazing part of this story isn't necessarily just the fact that I used his abilities in order to enhance myself. It was actually the moment where I shattered the perception of that manager, because he'd been watching this entire interaction go down from the get-go. His jaw nearly hit the floor. And it was in that moment that I realized that my own ability to believe in myself and to shatter not only his perception of me, but my self-perception of what I was going to be capable of was going to be so important for the rest of my life. And I think, I really learned some of those things about coming together, about strategy through those team experiences I had when I was a kid. So this was settled. I ended up working with this computer company for a couple of years. In fact, I love technology so much that I went on to pursue a career in the video game industry. And that's where we'll get on to our next section here about overcoming physical barriers. Now, contrary to what my friend Mr. Zoolander is saying here, it wasn't about fitting inside the actual building, because I actually did end up getting a career in the video game industry. I actually landed a job at one of the biggest game studios in the world, Electronic Arts. I pursued a career in video game design. I got my diploma. I was so excited. I couldn't believe that I landed the job. But again, the accessibility problem had nothing to do with the physical building of Electronic Arts. It actually had to do with the bus stop on the way to work. And so I'll tell you a little bit about my experience of that first day. So that first day of work, I had planned out my schedule to the T. I knew exactly what bus stop I had to get off at. I knew exactly through Google Maps what it looked like and exactly where I had to get off at. I was getting so excited. In fact, I saw some of my friends and colleagues that I'd seen in training at another facility get on the bus. So I knew I was on the right bus. And as I was getting closer and getting ready to get off at the stop, my stop was next. So I pulled the rope to let the driver know that I was going to be getting off the next stop. And I excitedly started to unbuckle my wheelchair and the harnesses that were holding my chair down and the hooks that were holding my chair down and in place. And I see one by one, some of my colleagues start to usher themselves off and get off at the bus. And as I wheel to the front with this huge smile on my face, getting ready, expecting that the driver is going to start to lower the ramp and let me off, as that last person who's in front of me gets off, before I could say anything, the driver begins to close the door and starts to drive off. Now, thinking this was some sort of a mistake, I said to the driver, wait, I don't think you understand. You see this lanyard? You see how it says Electronic Arts? I work here too. You got to let me off. But I wasn't expecting what he was going to say next. He said, I can't do that. I said, what do you mean you can't do that? He said, well, you see that bus stop sign there? I said, yeah. He said, you see how it's missing the accessible symbol? He used the word handicap. I despise that word. Maybe we can get into that some other time, but I'm going to use the word accessible. I said, sure. He said, yeah, well, since that's missing off of that bus stop, that means that the city has determined that it's not safe for me to let you off. And then that means that the next stop that I am able to let you off at is actually whichever one displays that symbol. Well, wouldn't you know it? The stop that displayed that symbol happened to be 3 blocks later. Now, I haven't explained this as part of the story yet, but Electronic Arts' main Canada campus is at the top of a huge steep hill called Sanderson Way. It's a massive, massive campus. So that was something I was prepared for. Wheeling up that hill every day, getting my arms big and strong like Rick Hansen, not a problem. But now I was being told that not only was I going to have to wheel up that hill every day, I was going to have to wheel back 3 blocks just to get to where my colleagues were starting. And that was hard to learn. And in fact, when you grow up in BC like I do in the lower mainland in Vancouver, that's not the easiest thing. Because now, if it was raining or if it was snowing, that would mean that by the time I got into the office, I would be completely drenched or soaked. Or goodness forbid that I would actually have mud on my sleeves and I was wearing an important blazer for an important meeting. And now when I got into the office, my hair was all disheveled and my arms were covered in mud. And now I'm furthering a stigma that people with disabilities just don't show up on time, just aren't prepared, and they always come kind of looking disheveled. But this was my reality, right? This is something that I had to accept. Until one day, I met a driver by the name of Chris. And that's where everything changed. You see, Chris, he'd been talking to me for a couple of weeks, and he'd seen my name badge and my EA lanyard. And after a couple of weeks, he just couldn't take it anymore. And so he says to me, hey, your name's Marco, right? We've been talking for a minute. I said, yeah. He says, Marco, I got to ask you, man. I really do. I don't understand. I mean, I'm seeing that everyone who works at EA is getting off at this one stop that's seemingly at the bottom of the hill, but you seem to be getting off 3 blocks later, and I got to know why that is. Well, thinking in that moment that I was the smartest person on the bus, I kind of puffed my chest out and I said to him, well, you see that bus stop sign there? You see how it's missing the accessible decal? Well, that means that the city's determined that this is not safe for you to let me off. But the next thing that happened was amazing. It was Chris's reaction. And that was, well, that's stupid. I said, yeah, of course, I agree. I think that that's stupid too. But what are we going to do about it? I mean, we're just two guys. You're a bus driver. I'm one of the employees. And he said, no, you know what? I think there is something I can do about it. And with that, he talked to his manager, who then talked to the city planner, who then talked to the technician. And they actually determined that when this bus stop was originally installed, sure, there may have been things like uneven pavement or thorn bushes or things that were dangerous, but today, there was no reason why this bus stop couldn't be converted to an accessible stop. And I kid you not, within a matter of 2 weeks, they had permanently changed this stop forever to be an accessible stop. Now, this story always touches my heart, and it's hard for me not to get broken up about it because here's a guy who was just a member of my community. He's just somebody who said, this isn't right. And we can make a change. He wasn't wearing the CEO title. He wasn't a big executive at the company, but he said that this isn't right. And this filled me with joy because I knew that there could be a ripple effect that would happen of this, because even if I didn't have this job for the rest of my life, that stop now and forever would be converted to a permanent accessible stop, meaning that the seniors population, mothers and fathers with strollers, other people with disabilities would be able to use this stop forever. Well, it's a good thing that that happened, because in 2010, very similar to what's happening today with coronavirus, I lost my job during the recession. And I was completely devastated because this is the only thing I went to school for. It's the only thing I knew. I mean, I had dreamed of this career of creating video games to create characters and worlds that had abilities beyond my own. And now, due to the recession, that was all shattered. You know, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I remember the conversation, calling my wife like it was just yesterday. She was my girlfriend at the time. And I called her and I said, honey, you know, I just found out that I lost my job and I don't know what I could do. It's not like I could just go and start flipping burgers at a burger joint, because it's far too dangerous for somebody in a wheelchair to be behind the kitchen where there's grease. Or it's not like I could put on a hard hat and go and just start working at a construction site for the same reasons. So I was scared, much like we're all scared right now with what's going on with COVID. But it was thanks to my wife, who's been such a guiding light and so positive, And actually, on the other end of that phone, she started jumping for joy with excitement. And I was like, wait, why are you so excited? I just told you I lost my job. And she said, do you know the amount of times I just drove you to work so that you and I could spend more time together? You've been working crazy hours and I feel like I never see you. And this is your opportunity to go out and do what I think that you were meant to do for your entire life. And I said, what's that? She said, duh, I think you're meant to go out and inspire people. I think your true calling is to light a fire in people. Well, I was touched by her saying this, but I had no idea about how to start a business. Again, I was just one guy, just like me and Chris. But then I started to think about some other people who were just one guy or just one person. Guys like Rick Hansen, who started this movement of wheeling around the world in his wheelchair to raise money for spinal cord injury research in the mid-'80s. And I bet you didn't know this about Rick's movement, but it's thanks to him that here in the Lower Mainland and that we have as many curb cuts as we do, because his very first offices of his foundation after returning from the Man of Ocean tour was at the UBC campuses. And there was very little curb cuts there. So he advocated, he raised his voice, and we changed the community as a result of it. Or what about guys like Terry Fox, who ran around the country to raise awareness on cancer research? And to this day, we still have students in school running throughout their community in his namesake and in his honor to do exactly that. So in that moment, I realized that losing my job was the best thing that could ever happen to me. It started me on this whirlwind of learning about myself. What could I actually do to inspire people? Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you. When I started out in my business, I didn't want to be the guy that was pigeonholed as a guy with a disability talking about disability. Because to me, I don't know, I wanted to be respected as an entrepreneur first. And so I've always been a good people person, and people have always asked me how I'm connecting with people. And so I actually developed a system called the CUBE principle, CUBE, creatively utilize your best energy. And I actually started my business with that in mind to teach people how to make strong, intimate, and authentic connections with people in their lives to get what they want in life. That's what I started with. But I avoided the accessibility stuff like the plague. I just didn't want it to be near me because I didn't want to be, as I said, pigeonholed. Well, you can probably see in some of these photos on your screen that I actually ended up not only having a guy like Rick Hansen as a poster on my wall, but I actually ended up working with Rick as a result of the work that I was doing as a speaker. You can see my wife and I there in the bottom left corner. And we're sitting there with Rick at an event. And that very event is that changed my perception yet again about myself and what I was capable of. When I was at this event with Rick and my wife, he was the keynote speaker, but I was Rick's guest and we were there together, and he's up on stage in front of about 600-700 people or so. And in the middle of his talk, now he didn't tell me what he was going to say, but in the middle of his talk, he stops and he says, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge somebody who's with me here today. His name is Marco Pasqua, and he's sitting with me at my table. Now, I want you to know that it's thanks to guys like Marco that I feel confident that here in our country, we're going to have a stronghold and we're going to have strong leaders. And it really gives me hope knowing that guys like Marco are out there, because that means that I can officially pass the torch on to this champion movement of accessibility and inclusion to guys like Marco. Well, that's all I needed to hear in that moment, was having somebody I've looked up to my entire life tell me that he thinks that I can make a difference. And that he even told me later that it's not something to be looked down upon to be speaking on the things that we're aware of because of our lived experience. In fact, it's something that we can embrace in our lives. And so with that, I started to pursue more aspects of accessibility and inclusion and really delving my mind into that area and into that field. So much so that I got trained as an official Rick Hansen Foundation Accessibility Certified Professional, essentially somebody who can look at the built environment and the environment around us and actually be able to assess it based on accessibility from all different aspects of life, whether that's hearing, vision, cognitive, mobility, you name it, that's the training. And it's completely changed my life. So now, not only do I have this speaking ability as somebody who speaks on a world stage, but now I can actually speak about something where my purpose and my passion become combined. And I want you to think about those things, about resilience, about your mental health as we're going through what we're going through today. What can you do to combine your passion and your purpose to do something more with what you're already doing out there? And I thought to myself, are there people that are transforming the leadership and culture? And absolutely that there are. There are many business leaders, city officials, people around our province and our country who are doing amazing things to transform the leadership and culture. Andrea is definitely one of them. Okay. But I actually had an opportunity as a result of being an accessibility consultant to work on an amazing project back in 2017. It was with a group called the President's Group, or Accessible Employers. Now, this was a group that was established by the BC provincial government because they wanted to create a board of BC business leaders who were making active changes in order to create more inclusive workplaces across our province, because BC wants to be the most accessible province in all of Canada in just a short while. But they knew that in order to do that, the government, I mind me saying, but they admitted they didn't really know what they were doing when it came to accessibility in the business sort of sphere. So they needed to get these business leaders throughout our province who were doing best practices that they could gather information from. And at the time, they knew they've been running since about 2013 as a board that was sharing ideas internally. But in 2017, they realized they actually needed to hire some staff in order to collect their learnings and compile them into resources that other people could learn from. And fortunately, that's when I was hired as one of only 2 lead consultants to work with all 25 companies that were on this board. Now, here's some of the companies that are on the President's Group as the main sort of consultation board. And I'm so thrilled to say that they actually have a thing called the Community of Accessible Employers that we started after I started as a consultant, so that not all companies in BC had to sit on this board necessarily and interact directly with government, but that they could take and learn the practices that these companies were teaching. And how did we do that? Well, we broke them down into bite-sized chunks and learnable pieces that everybody could learn and grow from in PDFs between 1 and 5 pages on a bunch of different topics. And you can go to the website, accessibleemployers.ca, to learn and get those resources. But I want to share with you, because now I'm no longer one of the lead consultants. I've gone to work back in my business full time for myself, but it was an amazing experience doing that for 2 years. And since I left last year as the lead consultant, there are 2 new amazing ladies who are their consultants now. And they actually created this infographic since COVID hit that I wanted to share a little bit about why hiring people with disabilities is amazing in the new normal. And I don't even like to call it the new normal. Personally, I like to call it the better normal. Okay, because I refuse to believe that we have to reshape our ideas and our life and about this new normal. I think that there's a hybrid model there that we can create. But here's some of the things that we learned while I was with the President's Group, that they've included these stats on this infographic. People with disabilities are 2 times more likely to meet and exceed financial targets, 6 times more likely to be innovative, 6 times more likely to anticipate change, because we go through change a lot, 72% higher retention, because many people with disabilities, it may be their first opportunity to work at your workplace, and they're actually taking this now in stride because you may have been the first employer to give them an opportunity. They've handed out their resume a dozen times or 100 times and haven't heard anything back. 86% better attendance, and 90% they performed equal or better than their coworkers without disabilities. And yes, these sources are sourced on the website. There is actually sources from a Deloitte study that actually collected all this information. Now, as far as COVID directly, you've heard my story earlier where I was talking about adaptability, being innovative. I used that gentleman's height because I'm vertically challenged to grab the video card down and make that change. Well, we've been training for this our entire lives, people with disabilities being in a situation like this. We're primed to work remotely. And I'm proud to say now, many companies are primed to provide remote work now because we have the technology to do so, much like we're doing today with this conference. And many people prefer temporary or flexible or casual opportunities anyways. And so if you're able to work from home and be more casual, it's about the mindset of the employer just as much as it is about the employee being able to do the job. And of course, there's some other benefits here. The companies that were more inclusive saw an economic benefit of 2 to 7 times based on the accommodations that they provided. There's a misnomer out there that accommodations are so expensive for people with disabilities, when in many cases, most of the accommodations are $500 or below. In fact, many are easy to do, like adjusting a desk height, providing somebody with task lighting so that they can see if they have low vision, magnification software if they need things to be magnified or blown up in any capacity. For me, it was basically just removing barriers. But now that I'm working from home, I've got my microphone here, I've got my camera, I've got my monitor, I'm ready to go. So there's a lot of people that are also ready to go as well. And I think that more and more employers are starting to see that as well. And here's some things that I would recommend that you get started with if you visit accessibleemployers.ca, whether you're an employer or you're just somebody in the community who's interested about accessibility and you want to learn more. The top 4 that I would recommend, of course, is the business case that we created. The accessible recruitment checklist. This is great to look at in terms of ensuring that you know what things to look for when you're recruiting people with disabilities. Some FAQs and misconceptions around hiring people with disabilities. And then, of course, disability-related language and tips. So that would be my suggestion for getting started, but that's at accessibleemployers.ca. So why does this matter? Why is this important? Well, we share different strengths and perspectives, being people with disabilities. We help to open people's eyes up to what's possible. It changes the focus from our disability to our abilities. What are we capable of doing? What are you even doubting yourself on, whether you're a person with a visible disability or not, that you could change the focus on and show people that you're capable, more capable than they think you are. And it encourages an open dialogue. So for many of the CEOs and business leaders, after I started working with those 25 companies, they became so courageous that they were actually willing to come up and actually say, you know what, team, I haven't told anybody this, but I struggle with anxiety and depression. And I just wanted to share that with the team. And you know what happened in those CEOs and business leaders doing that, because they set the tone? They started to have lunch and learns. They started to have Slack groups where more people were talking about the importance of mental health and making sure that you're there for each other. So it's a really good experience to be able to do this. I want to encourage everyone following my talk today to make authentic connections. Get to know your community members. Get to know the people that you work with. Discover their why. Why is it that they do the things that they do? Why is it that they want to pursue the career they are? Why is it that they're involved in recreation? All of those things. Support them to reach their goals. And speaking of supporting to reach their goals, prior to COVID, I wanted to get back into competitive shape. Admittedly so, I was not happy with the person I was seeing in the mirror. I was no longer that person because I started to do a lot of desk jobs and a lot of desk work, and enough was enough. So last year before COVID, I started working again with a personal trainer named Nola. She's an incredible individual. There was only one problem. Nola had never worked with somebody with a disability before. But as it happened, before I approached her 2 weeks earlier, the city of Surrey, where I live, offered adapted recreation training, and she happened to take the course. So although she was nervous about the adaptations that we might have to make in the gym, she was open to the idea of making these adaptations and these changes. And so you can see in this photo here, and in those of you who can't, there's a photo of Nola and myself, and I'm holding and grabbing down on this bar and pulling down. And there's a 5-pound weight that's been shoved underneath my tire, because I don't know if you can tell, Nola's a small girl. She's very strong, but she's tiny. And so that's a very heavy weight that I was lifting. And we were noticing that my chair kept sliding forward every time I was pulling down on the weight. So we adapted, we changed, we put a weight in front of my tire, and that was able to make that change so that I could work out with her. And she was incredible in terms of helping me to get back into the shape that I knew I could be in. But of course, then COVID hit. And again, I had to face challenge, mental health, resiliency, all of those things. But taking what I learned from Nola about myself and about her and about fitness, yet again, I decided to adapt workouts at my house. So this is me, not a couple of months ago, trying to get back into shape because I'll admit it again. They call it COVID-19, but I'm sure you've all heard of the COVID-15, which is those extra few pounds we've been gaining at the beginning of COVID. So I wanted to make sure I didn't fall victim to that, and I continue to push myself. And so I do these adapted workouts for myself at home to continue to push forward and be strong. And so it's been an incredible experience, but I do miss Nola. So what can you do all about this? Well, if you're a team leader, as I said, set the tone from the top. Allow yourself to be vulnerable with your friends, colleagues, and staff. Provide workplace accommodations when possible. Okay, be flexible with work hours and location. If we're doing a hybrid model of some people coming into the office and some people working from home, maybe, just maybe, if you see an employee struggling, maybe they need to start at 10 a.m. instead of 9 a.m. Are there things that we can adjust as leaders to make that a possibility? I know that there is. You can be creative and still make it work and still adapt and adjust in this changing world. And for team members, be a peer mentor. Be open and welcome. Okay. Check for environmental barriers. This is one of my biggest pet peeves. Okay. When my wife and I went to a restaurant months and months ago before COVID, we were out at a restaurant, and I hate when they use the accessible bathroom as a storage space for things like high chairs and extra boxes. And I went to go use the bathroom, and as I wheeled up to the bathroom and went to open the accessible door, I realized it was a bit jammed and I couldn't get in. I looked in and saw that there were boxes and chairs blocking my way of getting in. Well, I went and told the staff, excuse me, there are boxes and things blocking the entrance to this washroom. And she said to me, oh, don't worry about it. It's temporary. Well, I said to her, well, I'm a temporary customer and I'm about to leave because I really got to use the bathroom. So these are the things that I want you to consider when you're looking at your workspace. Check for potential tripping hazards or barriers that you might not other consider. But the biggest thing you can take away from all of this is just to simply ask how you can best support the person, because they're going to know themselves better than you know anything. And it's not about asking them about their disability, but literally saying, is there anything that I can do to best support you in this role to make sure that you're operating at 100%? So I want to leave you with that. And I believe that is the end of my presentation. So thank you so much, everyone. And I hope we do have a moment or two for some questions, but if not, we can answer them later. Thanks so much, Andrea and Stacy.
That was amazing, Marco. Exactly the way we wanted to get kicked off today on our OneAbility Education Day. So thank you so much. I also appreciated the kind shout out around my leadership. I think it's really important that you reference the President's Group, because it certainly is a gold standard in BC in terms of the type of work that you were initiating there and that is carrying on now. And in fact, I was just on a national conversation about it this morning. So there's
Awesome.
There's lots of stuff percolating right now. So we do want to open it up and see if anyone has any questions. As we mentioned, we can do those in the chat box, or you can jump off of mute. We have time for probably 1 to 2 questions.
Yeah, don't be shy, everybody. I was just vulnerable with you today, so I'm hoping that you'll be vulnerable as well.
Okay, not getting any questions, so I'm going to ask you one.
Okay.
If you had one piece of advice for the group today in terms of like how to get started, what would it be?
Well, I would say probably take a look at your web presence, because we're doing a lot of things digitally, right? And so if your biggest thing, it's almost like a field of dreams. They say, well, if you build it, they will come. And people say to me often, well, I would have all of these accessibility things prepared if people with disabilities would apply for the jobs. And unfortunately, sorry, I'm just realizing I have some chapstick here. And unfortunately, the one thing that is really, really strange about it is that they don't realize that if you adapt or you change your presence so that you actually are advocating and say that you actually have a diversity inclusion message on your website, but also remember your social media. employers do a lot of sleuthing of a candidate to ensure that they're not doing anything naughty outside of work hours, or that they have aligned ethics and values. But what about you as a potential candidate? Are you investing time in researching the companies themselves? Research those companies, because oftentimes the ones that are leaders in accessibility are proud to talk about it. And so they're going to share these tips and these tools with you and say, like, for example, I was hosted at Van City for the 2 years I was working for the President's Group, because the CEO was the co-chair of the President's Group. And I had seen Van City at every single community event I'd ever been at for accessibility and inclusion as a gold or platinum sponsor. So I knew I was in good company. So for anyone who's an employer, for anyone who has a recreation facility, a gym, be proactive. Don't just use a boilerplate statement of we accept all people of genders, sexuality, all these things. That's great. But also have fun with it. Be creative. Show your human side, and you'll get the people coming in and hopefully applying for jobs to work with you.
Awesome. We do have one question, and I think we'll do this one and then we'll hop to our break. So can you tell us about a time that you used the CUBE framework?
Oh my goodness, I use the CUBE principle all the time. But a perfect example of this, I'm kind of torn, because there was a time at which I used the CUBE principle and it actually landed me. And you know what? I will tell this story. It's a very quick one. It was the very first year I started my business in 2012. And actually, I was on a episode of Gene Simmons' Family Jewels. That was a show that was on A&E with Gene Simmons years ago. And he was actually in Surrey because his wife and his daughter, they have a lot of friends and things in Whistler. And she was starting a facility through the Center for Child Development, which I had physiotherapy in growing up. And so they asked me if I would be on the TV show talking about all the things physiotherapy, occupational therapy has done to help me in my life. Well, this was not going to be a opportunity I was going to miss. And so I was in a scene with Sophie, his daughter. And when we finished the scene, I said, hey, listen, I know this is going to be an out there sort of question, but I have to, utilize my ability to find strengths in other people in my community. And the strongest marketer I know in the world is Gene Simmons. Like, literally, he puts his tongue on everything. And I don't mean his actual tongue, but anyways. So I said, can he help me in terms of building out the business? I'm sure you get asked all the time, but I'm going to be courageous enough right now to say, if in the future, do you think your dad would have a moment to come speak with me? And she said, you know what? No one's ever asked me in that way before. How about right now? And I kid you not, we walked off of where we were filming. She walked me down the hallway. We walked into the green room. She knocked on the door. We walked in the green room and she opens the door and there's Jean and Shannon just sitting there eating some peanuts. And she goes, hey, Dad, this is Marco. He's a great guy. He's starting a business as a speaker. He's got this thing called the CUBE principle. He wants to talk to you about it. He wants to show you his marketing materials. Here he is. Bye. And she closes the door. And there I am sitting there. And he says to me, well, you're going to come over here and talk to me? And what I thought was going to be a 1 or 2 minute conversation ended up being a 45-minute talk about the CUBE principle, about the brand. He said, thank goodness I was a Canadian, because if I was an American, he would steal that acronym right away because it was so incredible. And he taught me a lot about body language in that moment and all these things. So that was truly incredible. But there's so many stories that I can share with in terms of giving without expectation that has helped to kind of build me up in my life. And that's just the very beginning. That was when I first started.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Acknowledgement from the person that asked the question, who's actually one of our co-chairs for OneAbility and does tremendous work in the organization she works with here in Victoria called Power to Be. So so thank you so much, Marco. It's always such a pleasure to have time with you. And I'm so grateful you said yes to this opportunity and were able to share your incredible knowledge and enthusiasm with our group today to kick us off on our Education Day. And I don't know if you're sticking around, but you're certainly welcome to join for the rest of the sessions.
Oh, no, thank you so much, everyone. And if you do want to learn more, you can go to my website, marcopasco.com, and you can learn more. And I'd be happy to chat with you in greater detail. But Andrea, Stacy, thank you so much for thinking of me. It's always a pleasure to work with you both. And you've got such great energy. I am going to stick around a little bit because I know some of the other speakers, and I'm really interested to see how it all comes down. In fact, Richard Peter, was one of the people who really inspired me with wheelchair basketball. And Richard and I have worked together in that capacity for many, many years. So I'm really, really excited to see his chat.
Awesome. That is great. And someone's appreciating all your memorabilia and your background. I know you keep setting up your office to be funner and funner every time I see you. So
there you go. Oh, thanks so much.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to pivot from Marco's presentation to a little bit of a break, but we're actually going to start by sharing a video. And we actually had a related question just in the chat box a few minutes ago around accessible training around kind of this whole strength training area. And so we at OneAbility had done a resource a couple of years ago around modifications and adaptations for strength training for individuals with disabilities. So we're going to, we'll send that resource out in our post-event wrap-up email. So I just wanted to flag that. And then I also just wanted to acknowledge that the event today, one, is being, is through financial support from it's from financial support from the Victoria Foundation. And we're super grateful that we've had tremendous support from the Victoria Foundation for a number of years around the OneAbility initiative. And today is being hosted by Pisces. Normally we would have been in person in their beautiful facilities, which they've just done a whole number of accessible upgrades to, but today is online. And so we're just going to share a quick video of some of what's going on for them. So I'm going to turn it over to our video player.
Hi.
Oh, hello. Are you having a good time?
Yeah.
That's good.
My name is Khalil. I'm Miriam's older brother, and we are a family of 5. We are originally from Syria, and we've been living here for almost 5 years. A very happy 5 years.
What is it like going to camp with your sister?
Cool. It was cool, fun. Exercising with her is fun, running around with her, and Miriam is a very fun partner. With Miriam, basically everything is a highlight because she has a different mind every time. All the leaders had really, really fun games. Everyone's so kind to each other, and the leaders just make everything easy and fun, and they help you when you're down.
What's your favorite part about Pisces?
Everything.
At Pisces, everything is a highlight. Yeah, that's how I feel.
If you could say anything to the team at Pisces, what would you say?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And it was a very, very fun 2 years. It was a pleasure being here.
I love being here.
Amazing. Thank you, Pisces, for sharing that great video. And we're so grateful for your involvement and your support of kicking off this Education Day in a totally different environment this year. It's been a bit of a journey of learnings, but I think it's going pretty well so far. So we're going to give you just a couple minute break right now to maybe do a quick bio break, and we will be coming back in about 3 minutes, so quick bio break, and we will kick off our next part of our presentation. So enjoy the break.